All right, hard yarners. Today is an incredible episode. We are joined. It was bloody awesome. We were joined by Dr Geoff Wilson and a fan favourite with John Elliott joining us as well as the co-host for today. First of all, just thank our sponsors. Do you know what as well? I forgot we didn't get the Patreon question, so I do apologise to the Patreons if you're waiting to hear those questions. My bad. But firstly, we like to thank Raunchy, the beer that actually tastes good. It's quite delightful.
You gave me a 4-pack of that.
Did you like it?
It was pretty good.
Fuck yeah!
It was pretty good.
That's not forced for
it
you
was,
to
it
say.
Was, it was also free. So
that's why it tasted so good.
Classic. And of course, as we see behind Dr. Geoff there, we're our alltradescover.com.au for all of your needs when it comes to trades, insurance for small businesses more so. You'd be better to sort of talk about this.
Small, large, come one, come all.
It's good for the tradies. If you have an issue, and if you anything fucking like Delby, who cannot do anything without hurting himself or stuffing everything up or breaking doors and whatnot.
Liability, tool cover, personal accident.
Everything. That's the best summation we've had since we've started doing it. So hit up alltradescover.com.au. But today we were joined by an incredible guest, Dr. Geoff Wilson. We talk about plenty of your adventures and persistence. But what did we chat about today?
Oh, mate, we went all over the place. We were in Greenland, Sahara Desert, Simpson Desert, Antarctica. But, largely just unpacking the three things that make resilience possible. And how do we teach resilience to our young folk?
Yeah.
Bear attacks.
Yeah, bear attacks.
Yeah, we had some bears.
That bear stuff towards the end, incredible. But there is a little flow state moment, I think, from about an hour, 50 minutes in to about an hour and a half where I was fucking captivated. So if you're ever back in town, mate, we'll definitely get you back on. Really appreciate your time. And let's get hard.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Welcome to Hard Yarns Podcast.
I am fucking fat.
Anything Chris White says, please disregard it.
5D is actually a state of being. It's a unity consciousness.
That was Hard Yarns with me, Frankie Rose. So I'm going to throw it over to your co-host,
Daniel Delby.
And Cameron Brand.
I would do this and then I'd gong.
Free in attendance for the millions listening at home. Let's get hard.
Water there. And do you want one as well, John? Good. So, but how are we going? We're feeling good. I really did enjoy your talk last night. It was incredible to actually hear some of that story, and we'll go through. But I almost want to go through your PowerPoint step by step. But I think the best way we can kick off this pod is how you two met, because John is probably one of our most popular guests, and he sort of alluded to the story of how you guys met on the barge, I think it was, or on the ship at some point. But if we could, start with that, because that's a great way to begin the story.
Well, even before we met, officially, Geoff reminded me of a story.
Yeah.
Before we got on the boat.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, remembering John's had a camel crisis in his life.
Yes.
And he's
Midlife.
he's had a mid-camel crisis.
Yeah.
And he's definitely a different human to the human I met in
Really?
Antarctica. How many years ago did we meet in Antarctica?
Seven? 6?
7, yeah. So imagine 6-7 years ago, I've not long come out of 53 days solo in Antarctica, which for me was almost like a spiritual experience. Being isolated, you're in the interior off the continent. It's a very different place to the peninsula where we were heading. I was a speaker on a vessel heading into the Antarctic Peninsula with 101 of Australia's bright minds, and John had somehow slipped into that mix.
How that happened?
I thought you were about to say 101 bright minds and John.
I think that would have been more relevant.
100 bright minds plus John. But no, I mean, they were all characters in their own right. And I'm walking in, and they're handing out these bright yellow survival jackets in the lobby of a hotel, and we're all lined up like penguins going to the slaughter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, this is a very different Antarctica to the one that I've known previously. So I'm adjusting to that. My wife Sarah's there, like, how are you going to adjust to seeing Antarctica with 100 people? And John's on the Travelator. He's overweight, like he's probably 20, 30 kilos more than you are now.
Yeah, about 30.
Yeah, we touched on that last episode. You'd lost a bit just through lack of alcohol, was it?
Yeah.
With the eye.
Well,
but yeah.
So he looked like he had the airbags deployed in the suit.
I was getting ready for Antarctica, mate.
Yeah, he was hoping to get left behind there.
Yeah.
He was just prepping for it. And he's in a bright purple suit with a big Havana cigar lit on the inside of this bloody hotel. And he's yelled at 9 o'clock in the morning at the top of his voice, right, who's coming with me to the strip club? And my wife turns to me and goes, I hate that man. And I'm like, I'm sure he's not as bad as he seems. And anyway, 7 years later, we're the best of mates, and we've had some adventures together.
I love that. I do recall the, and you did quip on it last episode and last night, but the smoking, what was it, elephant dung?
Oh, yeah. I think John's probably got a better memory of this. I've smoked all sorts of dung.
Hence better memory.
Yeah, that was sitting on the back of the icebreaker, and I went out there to spark up another one of those Cubans and see this, burly fella at the back with his nice grey beard glistening in the Antarctic sun with his little pipe hanging out. So what are you smoking? And he gives me a crack of it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, that's not bad. What's that? And he's like, elephant dung.
Bad habit.
This guy's different.
Fuck yeah. So I had a good, obviously, a listen to what you were saying last night, and your whole journey is incredible. And I do want to get into these sorts of stories that you were telling last night. But first of all, I want to get into, where does it begin? Like, where does this idea that you want to challenge yourself to this extreme point? Because I love your points on resilience building, especially in our kids, and your persistence and the 3 Ps of that. I really like that. But where does it begin? Because where do you're a vet, were you? Or
yeah, I mean, the beginning point is really hard to localize. But for me, I think there are just some people amongst us that have this adventure gene, and that might be that one person will look at the horizon and go, wow, what a beautiful sunset. And the person next to them will go, nice sunset, but I wonder what's beyond that.
Yeah.
And I was probably always wired, and I know John is wired this way, where we'll look at a sunset and go, listen, we'll enjoy the moment, but tomorrow I want to see what's on the other side of that sunset.
Yeah.
So for me, it was always, as a boy, I would just disappear, born in Africa, lived in Africa till I was 5, and then back in North Queensland, we lived on a research station, and my mum would just pack me a lunch and say, be back. Make sure you're back from the bush by dark. And I don't ever remember sort of having any supervision. I was often out, doing my own thing. And then that kind of lust for adventure then continued. So after school, I flew to London and worked for a while, bought a bicycle at the age of 17, and then cycled all the way back to Kenya, nearly got shot, had all sorts of adventures along the way, and then got this kind of passion for crossing deserts using wind power.
Yeah.
And then that kind of morphed into understanding that some men do really well under crisis and some don't, and watching 9 of our team of 13 break down during that first 42-day journey across the minefields of the Sahara Desert by wind power kind of stirred in me a real desire to understand from a scientific point of view and from a genetic and then environment point of view, what is it that makes one person hit an obstacle and just fall apart and they lose all decision-making capability. They go into a panic mindset, and then the whole situation is more likely to end in crisis. And then you have another person who on the outside looks no more robust. Their history might be, very plain, and yet they just thrive in the heat of the moment. A bit like a fighter pilot that, the very few fighter pilots that became aces were just guys that performed really well under crisis, but they also had the ability to use trajectory and triangulate in the air at speed and make sure the bullets were in front of the aircraft they were attacking. And that kind of mix is similar to how people perform under pressure. It's something you partially have, but then partially learn. And that's where the fascination is. If it can be learned, then we can distill it and teach it to our kids.
Yeah. I mean, because it's something where a lot of people would look at some of your achievements and, just off the top of my head to list a few: first person across the Sahara solo unsupported, or just by wind?
Just by wind power with the team, yeah.
And then the fastest ever solo unsupported crossing of Antarctica, and that's solo unsupported. The longest ever journey ever attempted or ever completed in Antarctica, solo unsupported.
Yeah.
First person to summit the highest peak, Dome Argus, in Antarctica.
Which is also the coldest naturally occurring place on Earth.
Yeah, pretty brutal place.
That's fucking... Ugh.
Kite surf the Torres Strait, to Papua New Guinea.
And that, when you told that story, doing it with your future son-in-law, my God, like that.
I was
pushing him to the edge. I love it. You want to marry my daughter?
I was recently in the Torres Strait, and we got our coffee every morning of this guy, Dan. And I leave the Torres Strait and get a notification through from one of my friends on the island says, Dan was out kayaking and got taken by a croc, we assume. And it's like, and then the next minute it's like, Geoff, we kite surfed that. And it's like, what you're going through.
So kite surf, you mean as in... is that the ones where they're holding onto the
so you're on a twin tip board back then. So this is a few years ago now, probably 10 years ago. And then the kites would blow up. But the problem is the only beach we could find was on the on the side that the wind was blowing over, so the leeward side of the island. So when you're kiting, you want to be taking off on the windward side so that you've got clean ocean air, but it was all cliffs on that side. So we had 2 or 3 instances when we were up there trying to work out whether it's possible, where the kite's fallen in the lee of the island and you're drifting in this muddy water just waiting for a croc to hit you in the chest. And your heart's beating out of your chest until you can get away from land enough to relaunch the kite. And you just know they're in the water because you've seen their footprints as you walk down to the beach. And they're big, like 13, 14-foot crocs. So you're not going to feel much. It's just going to crush your chest. And pull you down. So, that tension, obviously, for me, back then, I was well through my adventure career, so I'd sort of learn how to deal with that. But Simon was a 22-year-old lad who was dating my daughter, and I was trying to kind of squeeze the lemon hard enough to get the pips out so I could see what was in there. Yeah. And he dealt with it really well. Like it was pretty stressful.
But a lot of people look at all these adventures as a whole lot of insanity, especially if they're going from...
fucking coming from old mate over here. Walking across the country with 7 camels, 6 camels,
But I get it with what I've done. Like, you're insane. Why the hell did you do it? And that's a drop in the ocean in comparison to some of the things that Jeff's even undertaken. To take it from that conversation and that idea and that concept into reality. So, and you're obviously bringing a lot of sanity into the application of what you do on these things because of hearing you over the years talk about what you've extracted and then putting it into your everyday life. How do you deal with that insanity and sanity at the same time of where you are and what you're doing and keeping that level mind?
Anyone who's watched...
hold on. Sorry, guys. Go, Noxie. Yeah, Keep us on?
Yes.
Oh, you bloody legend.
We're not losing power.
We're what? Noxie. What's your company? What's your company? Oh, Western Power. They don't need any fucking help. Good work, Noxie. Love you, buddy.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, mate. We were for the listeners, just so we were about to start the podcast, and we got told by Western Power, who happens to be one of my mates, Noxie, just randomly popped in, and we were going to get our power turned off before the podcast. So great that that's not happening. Sorry, carry on. What we were saying.
Winding back to how do you balance that insanity, and obviously on paper, what people like myself are doing is kind of madness, but it's the madness that stretches humanity. So from, often my wife will say you were born 100 years too late. So Shackleton, Mawson, Scott, Wilson, on that same sort of resume. But for me, it's more like if you've watched The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, that magic cupboard where you step through into a new environment. On this side of the cupboard, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a vet surgeon. I'm leading 14 veterinary teams into greatness in terms of their passion for animal care through a company called Vet Love that we created. And then in the background, there's this dream big, plan well thing going on. So I've come up with a dream, be it to try and break the longest solo unsupported record that Mike Horn held for a long time at 4,814 kilometres in a polar region, and working on that for 7 years for less than 58 days in the doing. And that's kind of the ratio, if you're dreaming big and planning well, that you need. You know, it's 7 years to, 2 to 3 months in the doing. But there comes a day where suddenly you're ready and you step through the wardrobe, and the next minute you're landed with an Aleutian, a big Russian transport on the edge of Antarctica. The plane takes off, and then there's complete silence. Air temperature's minus 25. It's intimidating because you've come from the Gold Coast at plus 35, so there's a 60-degree Celsius temperature swing straight away, and your body's going into panic.
Yeah.
You're starting to realise, what the frick have I done? But I think as I do more and more journeys, we had a great question last night talking about, at what point do you push so hard that you get yourself killed? I think as long as you're dream big, planning well, and realising that most of your life is on the other side of that cupboard door.
Yeah.
That's your tether to Earth. I think you're managing the insanity by understanding that it's not all your life, it's part of your life. And I've met many adventurers in the wilderness that have given their whole life to adventure, and it ends up being a very lonely place to be, because it's by its very nature you're an isolated human, both in the environment, but also in back when you get home you feel abnormal because nobody else really understands you. It does appear as insanity to them, so it can be a lonely place to be. So that tether we talked about last night as well has been super important. But that's probably a long-winded answer to the insanity question.
No, but that's and you brought up something I really resonated with last night, and that can probably start off really the talk on the adventures. But the building resilience and the resilience character building that you were talking about with your kids, and instilling resilience in them from a very young age, smothering them in mud and whatnot, the photos you were putting up last night. I love that, because the instilling resilience is something we talk about consistently on this podcast. And I just want to know your thoughts on that, because it's something you do preach, and you had the 3 Ps that you were preaching. So could we talk about that and why you think that's important that we continue to do that?
And I think, winding back to Australia's history, the generations before us had serious lack. Like if we think of the Great Wars, World War I, World War II, the Depression afterwards, scratching their income out of the ground, dry summers, fires, floods. That created the resilience that we needed for good people. We've gone through a period of plenty. It's the famines have gone. Our kids basically get everything they want. They don't even have to get out of their chair to get food. You can Uber eat it. So we're creating a very dangerous paradigm here where our kids don't get any challenges till the challenge comes.
Instant gratification seems to be very common.
And I think that's the thing. You can't ignore the fact that the challenge is coming. You can't bury your head in the sand.
No, I mean, John's just about had his eye removed by a whip. He's a guy with everything on the outside, and then in a moment of foolishness by another human, he's nearly lost his eyeball. And that didn't really rattle him too much because he's been prepped and bashed by the environment over the last 5 years to a point of resilience. Whereas if we do not let our kids meet challenges before the big one, and the big one could be for them as little as, a girlfriend telling them, I don't love you anymore, or a client being rude at work. And we have this in the vet industry. They have an animal die under their care, a boyfriend dump them, a client be rude, and that's enough to make them suicide.
Wow.
So we have 4 times the suicide rate in the vet industry than the natural human population, and that's because we have this absolute lack of resilience and tenacity and grit. So for me, part of my mission in life within the Australian population, corporate and suburban, is to get parents to wake up and go, it is good for your kids to have lack. You know, don't give them everything they need when they want. I've just had my beautiful middle child put me through the ringer. She realised that I'm going on an expedition in a week, but my phone is healthier than her phone. And I met her at Telstra and we upgraded to a new phone so she can have my phone. And then she behaved so badly on the way home that I've gone, oh, fuck it. This phone is going to go into a drawer and you're going to look at it for 4 months while I'm in Antarctica. And that will teach you to not speak rudely to me at any point in time. But if I could just soften and go, oh, listen, you had a bad moment, here's the phone, you're just building that you know, bad behaviour. It's like patting a dog while it's growling.
Yeah.
And I know there are some parents who think my stance is harsh or hard, but the reality is we have reared 3 incredibly tough kids. Like they're courteous, they're kind. John, you know them. I could take them anywhere and be proud of them. And that's through making sure that we didn't give them everything.
Yeah.
And definitely made them wet and cold and uncomfortable.
Yeah, because life doesn't give you everything.
No.
You know,
It doesn't.
No.
I'm just going to turn your mic up as well, so keep on going.
I need to get. I'll pump it up a little bit.
No, you're right, buddy. Yeah.
Awesome.
You mentioned, and I've heard you say this a few times now, talk about it in our conversations, about the massively higher rates of suicide in your industry. Do you think it's just some of the factors that you've mentioned, but is it like also the access to the drugs or the know-how, or just a more of a, they've got death around them quite a lot, and so they've got a bit of a different relationship with that?
Yeah, John, it's a perfect storm of dominoes. Like the first domino is that during the COVID era, animals became really important to people, and they put heavy expectation on these young vets who have a very low tap-out switch already through their parenting style and their education style. That coupled with the fact that the tertiary institutions are selecting for intelligence, so they're picking the top 1% of the spear, and you know, not being disrespectful to these kids, they are damaged. A lot of that top 1% are on the spectrum. They want to work with animals because they've had a tough time with people. 4 out of 5 of our nurses come out of some sort of sexual or physical trauma. So we are dealing with people that are already damaged, and throw into that mix, they're professional assassins. They're the only industry that are taught to take life well.
Wow.
You know, our whole career is about managing pain, and we have the treatment option in extreme pain to terminate a life. And they apply that to themselves very readily because there's no fear attached to it, because there's no pain. So you mix all of that together with a lack of resilience, and it's a freaking nightmare.
And I imagine, like, the kind of person that wants to get into that industry gets in there for a love of animals.
Yeah.
And then they're professional assassins, so they find that out, you know, after going through all the courses and getting into the job, and like, I came here to save animals and I seem to be killing them a whole lot more.
That was my ex-wife's exact thoughts. Like, she loved animals, and I often suggested, why don't you get into veterinaries or become a vet or something along those lines. That was her passion, animals. And she said the exact same thing. It was I couldn't put them down.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. And so they go in with obviously going in for the love of animals, and then they have to take their lives as part of that.
It's tragic,
process.
You know? And I think like an analogy that I use a lot, and I'm going to paint a visual picture here for you and for anyone listening, is that you imagine you're solo at 11,000 feet, the air temperature is -30, -35, and then you're in the tent, you know there's a storm coming because you can see it blackening the horizon from one side to the other. You open your email and the grid files come through to say, hey, you've got a really severe storm coming, batten down the hatches, you're not travelling for the next 3 or 4 days, build an ice wall and we'll update you on the forecast in 12 hours. So the next 12 hours you are working like a little gopher, building ice bricks, building a wall on the upwind side of the tent. You're pegging everything down. You get the tent's pegs from being vertical. You turn them horizontal in T-slots, so you know you couldn't pull them out with a truck. Bury them, let it all set and freeze, and then you're ready. You go back in at the end of that process, get another email, and it's like, okay, this has gone from a severe Antarctic storm to one of the worst we've seen in 50 years on the Antarctic plateau. This may not be a survivable storm. And the pressure inside your head is increasing because of the scream of the tent, the flapping, but also as the barometer drops, you can feel it within your bones. So I look at that sort of pressure build up. It's very similar to the pressure that most business people felt in that sort of March, April, May period of 2020 when COVID was first on the map. And it was like a wrecking ball. One business would do well and the one next would get taken out. And I know in the veterinary game, we had 140 staff, millions in debt, and the first call was that hairdressers and vets were going to close as well as all the other businesses that were ruined. It felt very similar to that pressure and just holding till you got a break. And I think if we can teach our kids that a storm always has an end, it doesn't matter how bad that storm is, as long as you just hold and make good decisions during that period and just control your breathing, don't do anything rash, don't make any decisions when you're tired, you will outlast the person next to you and you will see the light come at the end of that storm. And whether that's a cancer journey, a relationship crisis, or a kid going off the rails or a business up against the wall, all of the same rules apply. And I think my role in my expeditioning is to showcase that in the field, and unfortunately that means that I have to get into difficult situations to do that.
Yes.
But then to bring those home truths back to our young people and say, hey, we can teach you guys this stuff to a point where you can get those forecasts, start building a plan, dream big, plan well, and outlive the storm.
Yeah, and that's it definitely resonates with me, that sort of thoughts, because I'm trying to do that with my daughter, trying to raise this kid that can weather the storm and see the end in sight. But it's very hard as well. It's difficult as a parent watching your kids suffer, and you do sometimes get wrapped around the finger. Also, you go through bad days where you're like, can't be fucked. Here, deal with it.
Yeah,
sort
take
of whatever.
the screen.
Exactly. And I'm conscious of the fact that at times I'm not great and I'm not perfect, and I'll be like, just fucking play with the iPad. I can't be fucked at the moment. Like, I'm conscious of that, but I'm very also and very aware of and I've been dealing with that stuff recently where I've had to teach my daughter lessons. Now she's only 5, she's nearly 6, so she doesn't quite grasp the concept of what I'm trying to teach her all the time. But I'm trying to instill in her a bit of resilience as much as I can possibly now as well. In the modern world, it's fucking challenging because instant gratification is so abundant in every aspect. And I use this example so commonly, and the listeners might have heard me say it before, but just something as simple as when we were growing up, or when I was growing up, even TV, you still had to wait for the next program to come on. If you didn't like it, the ads were on, you had to wait for the ads to finish, you had to get the TV guide, you had to find out when you were going to watch it. That was it. And you only had 5 or 6 channels you could choose from. Now they have iPads. They don't like that. Flick to the next one. There's an ad come up, skip, next one. It's instant gratification. And I know that's a spoilt sort of first world version of instant gratification compared to what I had, because the generation before me was obviously even worse. Like they had it even harder. Some of the generations before that didn't even have TVs. So I understand how sort of silly it does sound, but that's an example I'm giving the kids now.
That's where you were touching on before about the hard times that create the hard men, and then hard men create easy times create shit blokes.
Well, I think the cool thing is that despite everything getting easier, that easiness can be used to set up resilience tempering. So say in a situation where your kid has an access to an iPad, the fact that they love that iPad, denying them that at certain periods of the day will create tenacity and grit and resilience. So you're using the very thing that's creating the problem against itself by saying, hey, I'm absolutely giving you free access, but it's only going to be from 4 till 6. And then at that point it gets shut down. And the problem we're giving ourselves by giving free access is, A, we don't know what they're looking at, but B, it's not teaching them to do without anything. And it's the doing without that creates the tenacity and grit. And, if we go down to the underpinning factors for adult resilience, being the 3 Ps that we talked about last night, so purpose, passion, and persistence, and we'll unpack them, each of them. In a child, they don't give a crap about the 3 Ps. It's just about creating hardship through discomfort and lack. So whether that is just, and I think back to some of the moments where I know my kids learned the most about tenacity and grit. It was camping trips where I forgot basic items like matches, or the tent leaked, or we got rained on for 2 days and we're playing cards in an inch of water in the bottom of the tent.
Yeah.
So, you know, lack of planning then helped my kids now. But it's not like I was taking them every weekend. So don't beat yourself up as a parent if you're not getting out there much. They only need 1 or 2 memories of a great misadventure as a kid to set that foundation up for them to then understand resilience development later on. But if you've got a child that's never spent time with their mum, never spent time with their dad because we're too busy getting stuff for them, you know, there's no foundation for them for later. They've got to work it out on their own. But, you know, the tragedy is a lot of the time we feel like we're doing the best thing as a parent by working like a beaver and getting home late, leaving early. In fact, most kids would rather you be home and be present, kicking the footy in the backyard, than you say, hey, we bought a holiday house down at Margaret River.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to give a shit about that when they're 15, 16, 17. They just want time.
Yeah.
And it's in that time that the ability to build resilience happens.
One of the things you mentioned is that your mum would pack a lunch for you and you'd just head off for the day. So you spent a fair bit of time quite early on doing solo little adventures. So, and you've obviously dragged a lot of your family across on some of your adventures now as well. So you've had that mix of solo and bringing people along for the ride. How do you find the difference on adventures between that solo aspect? Which do you think is more formulative for you in regards to the solo adventures where it's really just you against the elements? Or is it taking other people along for the ride and seeing their struggles and what they're going through and almost reinforcing the lessons you've learned in them and seeing it in real world application? Like, how do you find the difference?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty funny story, and it's a great question, John. But there was a massive shift in me based on a misadventure. We built a team of 13 men to cross the Sahara Desert in 2009, and you know, a lot of the guys who want to do something like this are alpha males, and alpha males do not do well in hostile environments because they're used to getting everything their own way, and when the environment gives them a smack, they're a bit like a spoiled child. It doesn't go well for them. So we had 4 guys, 2 Kiwis, 2 Aussies racing each other across the desert using kite buggies, and with landmines, drop-offs, you know, bandits. Al-Qaeda had severed 4 heads of British tourists the month before he went through Mauritania. So, you know, there was all this underlying tension. The teams exploded, and we had cooks trying to strangle each other, the guy trying to beat on a team leader for the support crew. Steve Gurney, who was one of New Zealand's leading adventure racers at the time, kind of decompensated, got lifted by a kite, had a head injury, multiple fractures, you know, screaming in the middle of the night with a complete breakdown with a kite caught in a thorn tree. And it was such a hard journey to get the team through. We got the job done, 2,500 K, 42 days. But at the end of that, I thought, man, I'm not doing the team again. And if I do, I'll never travel with an alpha male again. And we've always built teams with probably what I would say beta females, beta males who are, you know, the guy, a bit like the special forces. They don't pick alpha males. Like you don't want an alpha male in your team as a special forces team. It's very similar in the adventure environment. You want someone who puts team ahead of self and understands that the environment will pass. They don't have to fight it. Alpha males tend to get themselves killed sooner in hostile environments. So from then on, I pretty much operated solo until this next adventure coming up, Project Zero, will be a team of 4. But those 4 are just incredible humans. I've got my son Kid as my on-ice partner, and then Krusty Burton and Jordan Pearson, who are, you know, their servant leadership at its heart. They would lay down their life for their crewmate, and I feel totally safe with that crew. Whereas other than that, it's the reason I went solo was I just didn't want the stress of dealing with multiple dynamics in a hostile environment.
Yeah, I feel like when you put people in a stressful situation, you find the true character of that person. And clearly, obviously, on this trip, which sounds ridiculously stressful,
so difficult.
Dodging landmines and going through very scary terrain, I guess. And then obviously the challenge of it, the physical challenge, would be demanding as well. I guess finding the true person, you can always see it. And if you have those people who are probably built more resilient or have had a bit more of a tempered way of looking at things, you're obviously going to be in a better situation.
Yeah, I mean, we call it squeezing the lemon till the pips come out, and it's a great thing. You know, if I've got anyone dating my daughter, I try and do that to them.
Yeah.
I've been really privileged with Simon Goodburn, who married my eldest daughter, to be able to squeeze him so hard that any nastiness popped out, and he's an incredibly resilient human now. Like we set the record for the fastest south to north crossing of Greenland together, and during that journey, you know, having tapped out of the Torres Strait one years before, and I had to limp him to the beach, you know, on that one, 18 days of brutal hardship across the polar plateau there, he never once looked like quitting, and in fact he started a weaker kiter than me and ended a stronger kiter than me, so
wow.
he was learning daily, and that gave me real encouragement to go, okay, we can do teams as long as they're people that we've worked with, but not only that, this resilience therapy, wilderness therapy, is creating incredible humans.
I mean, you mentioned on the recent team that you've assembled. What are you doing with that team? I know bits and pieces, of course, but like, run us through what this next project is.
Yes. Before we go into all that, let's go to the Project Zero.
Because we did the media launch in Sydney last week, and then I went and trained up in the backcountry and went off a cliff and got skewered by a snow gum. So it's not been the best bloody prep for it.
He's telling me, so he was going along and he's like, I thought my leg was stuck on this gum tree, you know, like I thought it just whacked into it, and then I pulled it, but I was like, the bit of the twig has actually gone straight through my calf muscle.
What?
So I just ripped it off, and this was in an email to us. He said, so I just ripped it off and I've stitched it up.
Oh my God!
Don't worry, I'll make the plane. I'll be over in Perth tomorrow.
Jesus,
what is wrong with this fella?
Oh, we got some stitches there, and the fella that stitched me up, I walk in and he's like, hey, I know you. You're that polar bloke. I follow you on Instagram. I've gone, oh, shit. And then he's pretty much just started to stitch me with no local. I'm thinking, he must think that these explorers don't feel pain. I'm like, freaking hell, I'm feeling that.
Yeah, fucking
he had his finger in there. And anyway, that wasn't the best prep. And my poor wife had read in the media that I was going to be away for 2 years. And I said, hey, honey, don't believe what you read in the press. Talk to me.
Yeah.
I would tell you if this is a 2-year continuous expedition. What they should have said is that it is a series of 7 polar journeys over the period of the next 2 years, where I do get to come home whilst we move the boat into position. So the idea for this one is to explore carbon neutral. So at the end of my last Antarctic journey, my boots were in basically slush. I was on the edge of the continent, and the continent was sliding into the ocean at an alarming rate. And I'm like, okay, I'm seeing this carbon-induced change firsthand. My community is the adventure community and the veterinary community. And on the veterinary side, for every animal we operate on, we personally plant 2 trees up in the Borneo jungle.
Love that.
So I see them going to the ground. There's no politics, no carbon debate. Those trees are in the ground.
Yeah.
On the adventure side, I need to get our community to understand that the days of arriving to the start of your adventure using carbon-inducing vehicles is over. You know, once we're on the mountain or in the desert or on the ice, we're pretty low impact. You know, we're eating dehydrated food, a little bit of stove, and it's generally man-powered. But the ins and outs are horrendous. Like a big Russian Aleutian jet that you could park 50 Humvees in is not a good low-carbon entry to Antarctica, and Antarctica and the Arctic regions are just getting hammered.
Yeah.
So the 7 journeys are designed so that people can follow along in real time. So we'll have live webcams on board. I'll send you the links. The website's project0.earth. that'll have the live webcam feed, so you'll be able to see us getting brutalised. So if you're having a tough day at work in Perth, you can go, wonder what Jeff's up to, and see me, getting washed off the back deck or shoveling snow or dodging icebergs in the Southern Ocean. So the first leg is from Gold Coast all the way through the Southern Ocean, around the bottom of the Earth, and then avoiding the iceberg line, and then back up into Patagonia. And then we clear customs in Chile, enter the fjord lands, and approach one of the biggest glaciers on planet Earth with respect, because it is enormous, and find a safe route from ocean level up to the top of the polar plateau, or the Patagonian polar plateau. And Krusty and Geordie will keep the boat in position, keep it safe, while Kitali and I do a west to east to west crossing. So that's the second leg. And then we sail all the way down south through the Fiordland, through Magellan Strait, out the Beagle Channel, around Cape Horn, and then across the fearsome Drake's Passage to the Antarctic Peninsula. Leg 3 will be a similar journey. The boat parked off a place called Sierra Cove.
Yep.
Krusty and Geordie keep the boat safe while we do a west to east crossing, and we'll overlook where Shackleton's boat got iced in 1915. So then we come back to the boat and then make our way back up through the Falkland Islands up to Itajaí in Brazil, and the boat will stay there for the majority of next year. So I come home, do some veterinary work, try and pay some bills, and be a good dad, good husband. And then legs 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all polar journeys based in the Arctic region, so Iceland, Svalbard, and then an attempt to get to the northern pole of inaccessibility. So the design is so that we can showcase on every journey in real time how we're offsetting. Anytime we turn an engine on, we're recording that. We're trying to be wind-powered, kite-powered, hydro-powered, solar-powered, and human-powered. Anytime we're not, it's open accounting and just trying to build a map. We've got a very clever guy, Finn Walton, in the background doing our carbon counting, and we've aligned with POW, Protect Our Winters, who are another young lobby group saying, hey, we've got to do something here, just to try and get it to a point where, by the 7th journey, it'll be the wrong thing to do, to climb Everest, to cross the Gobi Desert, whatever it is you're doing, you need to make sure that you're doing that completely carbon neutral, and that's possible.
And that's obviously a hot topic at the moment, climate change, carbon emissions, the science behind it and stuff. But regardless of the debates on what's causing climate change and the heating of the Earth, the one thing everyone can agree on, whether they are on one side of the argument or the other, is that pollution is horrific, and it's destroying beautiful habitats, including Antarctica and these sorts of areas. So is there also a push or a fight against pollution? Because polluting, regardless, I think, it's something I'm pretty passionate about. I would like to see beautiful beaches everywhere. I'd like to, because beaches are my thing. I hate what you do. But it's I'm sure you've been on some adventures and just seen shit, and you're like,
oh, it's crazy. Like Lisa Blair, who just circumnavigated Antarctica, was telling me she took 80 samples in a clockwise fashion around Antarctica. 80 of 80 had microplastic in. So we're doing similar. We're pushing seawater through a filter, and then those filters get sent back with a latitude and longitude to a lab in Sussex to just work out, okay, what's the density of microplastics. The interesting thing there is I learn a heap of stuff as I go, and I think one of my strengths is that I'm open to persuasion. Like if somebody can show me that the carbon science is wrong, but at the end of the day, more trees and less plastic in the ocean is a good idea.
100%.
And that's the thing, when you don't get sucked into the political kind of back and forth, and you just go, right, is there improvements that I can make?
Yes.
Is moving towards those improvements a better outcome for myself, for my kids, for,
the planet. Yeah.
Then why would there be a debate? It's kind of like getting distracted a little bit by the shiny thing over here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I almost like leave people to have that debate, and I just set in place my own parameters, whether it's for the company or for myself.
100%.
And operate by those parameters. It's just a better way of doing business, or a better way to operate.
Even if it's little things like recycling correctly. as well. Like I for so long was recycling incorrectly. Didn't realise it's chucking shit in the recycling bin thinking I'm doing the right thing. You got to look what they can and can't take, what they want you to do with it, like peeling fucking stickers off and cleaning bottles and whatnot. So that's might seem like the most minor, insignificant thing, but if everyone made that minor, insignificant little change, that's a big change overall.
So I mentioned last night when I left the company for 4 or so years, the CFO puts her hand on my shoulder and she's like, "It won't be worse when you get back." And I kind of feel like that's the modus operandi that you want for your interaction with the planet, your interaction with Earth. You just kind of want you to put your hand on the shoulder, like, I at least won't make it worse. That's
exactly.
the start point.
You don't want to contribute to it.
I mean, it's funny if we're having hard yarns, having hard conversations, which is what we're here for. I think back to a journey that I did for a charity called the She Rescue Home, and that charity was, I mean, every journey I've done is for a cause, because I know selfishly if I get it boxed into a corner and it's just about me personally getting a record or doing something, I'll tap out.
Yes.
But if I'm aligned with something that I believe in and I've met the kids involved, or I've seen those kids or seen the women with breast cancer involved on my Antarctica crossing, was for the McGrath Foundation, I purposely met those people so that when it got to a point where the chips are down, I can't give up because I've seen them and met them. This one was for She Rescue Home, and their job was to bust in undercover and steal kids back off human trafficking networks in the Laos-Cambodia triangle. Wow. And those kids were as young as 8, 9 years old, caught up in prostitution. When I would go to the media to talk about that, it was a very like the climate change thing now. They're like, "Oh, listen, that's a hot topic. You know, there's so much split of opinion. It's awkward. We don't want to talk about pedophilia and adventure. They don't mix. It's oil and water." And I'm like, well, no, that's where you're wrong. I'm the Trojan horse. Yeah. The adventure is the Trojan horse that gets me through the gate, and then we unpack the nastiness. And in that one, it was pedophilia. In this one, the Trojan horse is they love the father and son thing. Like Katali is this broader, stronger version of me. He's almost like the genetically engineered adventurer. He's not a cleft palate kid from Africa that's been bashed and got more scars than your average, overripe avocado. Yeah. But it's that father-son dynamic that the press is loving. And then once we get the Trojan horse into the citadel, we unpack the climate change. I've not seen anybody who's not, doing the ostrich thing, not saying that if we don't change what we're doing as a planet, we're not heading for a cliff.
And so you bring up an interesting topic. So that one there, for example, like finding you're trying to raise money for these child traffickers, because we're not mainstream media. We're obviously happy to have these conversations. That must be incredibly challenging to see that firsthand, what's happening. And I guess that's what you're alluding to. You put the vision of these sorts of people who are in a much harder situation, and it makes you feel like you can get through anything else.
Yeah, and I think for, one of the keys for resilience that we talk about is finding your purpose. And that might just be meeting the guy who gives you this sudden light bulb moment. I met a guy who didn't want to be named. He was called the Grey Man. And the reason he was Grey Man, he was ex-Special Forces, and he got a passion for these girls. So the She Rescue Home would pay him to pretend to be a Russian on holiday wanting sex with young girls. So he would go in, pay the money to the owner, and then he would semtex the back wall, take the whole wall out and escape with this girl. And he told me the story of this 9-year-old girl that he had been ushered into a room, and it's literally a effed up room with a rickety old bed, but it's all Besser brick. No escape, tiny little toilet-sized window for air, and he shuts the door, and this girl sits on the bed with her hands on her knees and bursts into tears, and he puts his hand on her shoulder and says in Thai, he was a Thai girl, calm yourself, I'm not here for you, I'm here to take you away from this. And she said to him, really? And he said, how long have you been in here? And she looked at him and said, you're my first client. And he then blew the back wall out and takes this girl out, and she then was cleaned up she was disease free. A lot of them couldn't move. Once they're AIDS positive, they can't cross borders. So if they got a girl like her who had not been used previously, it was much easier to get her a new home, new identity.
Yep.
Oftentimes, if they got them back to their family, they were resold. So they would get them away from their families, educate them. This girl became a doctor over the following decade.
Wow.
And is now working for the She Rescue Home, getting these girls like her fixed up. So that guy became the pivot point for me to go, okay, I found my purpose for the Sahara crossing.
Yep.
And whenever we had those guys break down, I would have to reset them and go, hey, you are not here for yourself. So pull your head out your ass and get your hands off the cook's throat. I know he's pissed you off, but if you take out the cook, we can't run the team and these girls suffer. So get your head in the game and get your purpose back. And I think finding that key person that drives the purpose. And, you know, if I look at 72% of Aussies statistically don't enjoy their day job, that's a bit of a tragedy, really. You know, we need to find what our purpose is in whatever you're doing, whether you're selling shoes. I bought shoes yesterday from a guy in Hay Street. The guy loved shoes. I'm like, man, this is awesome. This guy's found his purpose in a pretty mundane situation. But that gives him the ability to work harder, go longer than the guy next to him because he's got his purpose, his passion, persistence comes along the way. So I know I'm rambling a bit there, but I you know, the underpinning for adult resilience is definitely purpose, and that can be just waiting and being patient for the guy or the girl.
I think some people find it hard to find the purpose because they put so much pressure on it. Like they go, you know, a purpose has to be some kind of lifelong, you know, pursuit. And you've just described you can take on these like massive challenges with a different purpose aligned with each one.
Yes.
All right. And that's just the thing that you almost piggyback on, which is an essential component to complete the task. And I think in that's something that, you know, people can take the pressure off themselves of having to have that purpose as such a grandiose, massive thing. Yeah. You know, you're just using that as the skill set in order to accomplish something. So you can still be extremely passionate about it, but it's not like I've dedicated my whole entire life to this one cause.
And finding your why, finding your purpose, finding your passion. We spoke about it with Andy Donaldson, who literally recently just broke the world record for the most straights crossed swimming solo, unsupported in a year. Incredible. He broke it a couple of weeks ago. So for the listeners who did listen to that episode 3 or 4 weeks ago, he achieved his goal, which is well done to Andy. But his driving message was when he found it tough, when he was getting battered and bruised in these terrible, horrific conditions, like swimming from one island to another in Hawaii, throwing up, like, you know, in immense amount of pain. He just thought of the people that he was doing it for. He thought of his family who was supporting him. He thought of the people who were suffering from mental health, who he was trying to raise money for. And that ended up driving him through those harder times. And that's the perfect example of his purpose far outweighed his own personal goals and ambitions.
Yeah, and he sounds like he's the embodiment of Friedrich Nietzsche's quote, you know, those people who have a why can deal with almost any how. And that's really all we're trying to do. It doesn't mean that your purpose, your next purpose doesn't have to be the thing you die on the cross for. It is just simply something that gets you out of the bed in the morning. And if we go back to the Japanese word ikigai, ikigai literally just means the reason for putting your boots on in the morning. And the reason Okinawa was such a hard island to overcome was every single Okinawan from birth, they're fed on this idea of ikigai, you know, your purpose in life. They have more octogenarians and more 100-year-old people on that island than anywhere on earth. So having a purpose actually physically changes the way your brain ages. It changes the way your neurons work. It changes your immune system. So there's absolute physiological reasons why a human being needs purpose. The Okinawans realised that early, and they've just built it into their DNA. So we can grab that and go, okay, unpack this ikigai. There's so many different levels to it, but the basic thing is a human being needs a reason to get out of bed in the morning. If you know, we've all got mates who get depressed. One of the first things they do is sleep more because there's no reason to get out of bed. So, for someone like John, his personality is loud and boisterous and vivacious, but
Really?
he's exciting to be around because he reminds you that there's great things in life and there's reason to get out of bed. And we've all got mates who suffer depression, and when you're going for a beer or a coffee with them, you have to fortify yourself because they're going to drain you. They're not, the reverse of that is the adventurer mindset, where you might come away feeling a bit challenged, you might come away feeling a bit tired, but you're sure as heck not going to come away depressed.
Yeah. It's funny. It's only just as you're saying that I realised before I took off on the camel trek, I knew something was off. I didn't want to be the 50-year-old that poured out the end of the lifestyle that I was pursuing at that particular time. And the mornings, I always used to say I don't get out of bed till I'm finished sleeping, and I was such a late starter most of the time, and there wasn't that, get up and drive to just get out and attack the day. Post camel trek. Like, as soon as my eyes are up, it could be 3:30 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning. As soon as my eye... Yes, thanks. Too soon, Geoff, too soon. But as soon as that eye is open, I just want to get into it. Like, I was like, why would I waste another second in bed? And I'm up. And it's like, I've got to remind myself to have breakfast because I'm just so keen to get into it. And I'd lost that before the camel trek, and it's like I found that purpose, that ikigai, that reason to put my boots on in the morning again.
And when you see someone like get that moment, it justifies the madness. Like for me as a family man, that last journey, 58 days in a tent, temperatures on the top of the dome down to minus 55 Celsius, the first 17 days, wind chill more brutal than I've ever felt. I was crying on the phone to my wife, Sarah, on the SAF phone at night going, I don't know what is wrong with me, but I'm breaking down every day. And then I would rebuild over a matter of hours and then have to do it again. And it was because the wind chill was hovering between minus 88 to minus 92 for the first 17 days straight.
Fahrenheit or Celsius?
Fucking yeah. Jesus. Yeah, it was brutal. I didn't know that a human being could operate in those temperatures. So it was only when I realised that I went, okay, this is not too bad. But to put yourself through all of that makes no sense at all until you have somebody back home here go, I heard you speak on a podcast and you dropped something into my soul and my life's never been the same. Had a guy last night at Johnny's kickoff for the Green Broker, give you a little plug there, mate, Elliott Insurance, who came up afterwards and I'd said on the podium, hey, you guys, when you come and give me feedback that something has changed in your life, you justify the madness. All of those lonely times on a plateau, or those times where, you've had a near-death experience that was so close that you're like, what am I doing this for? When you have someone come to you and go, my life has had a pivot. I've changed my whole mindset and you were the catalyst. And Johnny last night said when he met me, a lot of his lust for adventure and for change and for a more dynamic lifestyle, early bed, get up and get moving in the morning and push hard, came from meeting me. And that's, that's a great affirmation that I'm making a difference in some small way through the madness.
Small way? You made me homeless for 5 years.
Well, you are very inspirational, and the mindset and the resilient stuff is obviously a great, and I'm sure that'll come back around through the chats. But I wanted to move towards some of the stories and some of the treks you've encountered, because some of them are, what you were mentioning last night, were incredible. Even some of the near misses you've had, the standoff with a bear and a few things.
The near miss of the Frenchman in Antarctica.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that wasn't so dangerous.
Could have been.
Could have been. Oh, Johnny.
You're surrounded by...
Come on.
You got to tell this one.
Okay,
so we're on the aircraft, and bear in mind, the purpose for this one was to raise funds for the McGrath Foundation. Had a beautiful mate of mine, Katie, who was going through breast cancer, and I said to her, hey, I had this dream last night of building a sled made of boobs and dragging it from one side of Antarctica to the other. Who would you want me to raise funds for? Who's made a difference in your journey? And she said, without a doubt, the McGrath Angels have been a blessing to me. So I reached out to Tracy Bevan, we're really good mates now, and said, hey, I've got this mad idea of making a sled from my wife's breasts, dragging him from one side of Antarctica to the other. Anyway, fast forward a year later, I'm on an aircraft, pretty badly funded. So I've got sleds, I've got borrowed clothes, secondhand skis. I'm loading onto a Russian transport, and on there is a French explorer, Faisal Hanesh. He's also a good mate now. But he is sponsored by Bitcoin in the early days when they had plenty of cash. He's got brand new sled, beautiful French down suit, new skis. He'd been living with the Norwegians for 11 years, and he's the man. Like you'd look at him, and I didn't realise, but it became a race because he was going for the same record. Only 2 men had crossed Antarctica solo unsupported through the South Pole before.
Wow.
Both Norwegian. One of them was my hero and mentor, Borge Usland, who held the record at 67 days. And I'd rung him as an uplink and said, hey, I need you to train me to beat your record, which he essentially did. And anyway, we're on the aircraft, and I'm dragging this pink bloody sled with a set of nipples on it. And the 10 guys on the aircraft had a betting syndicate, and they all bet for the Frenchman. Now, he got caught in the first storm that I got caught in. It was 4 days of sheer terror. Like you imagine you put a white mouse in a bucket and beat it with a stick for 4 days straight.
Wow.
That's what it felt like. You're just getting this rising wind. The tent we knew would fail at 80 knots, and the wind is hovering around 76, 78 knots. And I'm outside. You couldn't see. You couldn't breathe. You had to crawl. The wind's over 200 kilometres an hour. 78 knots would be probably 160 kilometres an hour. So it's a brutal environment to be in. 3 kilometres from me is a Frenchman going through the same thing, and he's getting brutalised. And anyway, to cut a long story short, the storm ends, I get moving and go into a crevasse field that is just beyond measure. It took me 2 weeks to pick my way through it. During that time, Faisal, the Frenchman, hovered behind, took him longer to recover, and then he came into the crevasse field, felt very unsafe, saw some of the bridges I'd crossed, felt I was taking too high risks, and got a lift from a vehicle around the outside to the top of the plateau. Now, at the 2 week mark, I start getting a bit of wind, and I kite out of the crevasses, and I see this red tent on the horizon. And I'd got a text the night before from Faisal saying, hey, come visit me on your way past. He'd lost his unsupported status, so it now is no longer a race. I was the only guy unsupported. As I'm approaching the tent, I start seeing that it's getting buffeted and thrown around, and realise he's going to be under stress again because there's another storm coming.
Yep.
Flick back in my mind to a conversation in the aircraft as we're flying out, where he's yelled at me over the sound of the aircraft, do you have any movies? And I'm going, what? And he said, do you have any movies? And I said, yeah, I've got a hard drive with 4 movies on it. And he's like, 4 movies? That's one storm. You won't last. Let me download you some movies. So I gave him a hard drive, and he dumped about 120 movies on it.
Yeah.
And then he yells over the aircraft, do you want porno? And I'm like, what? And he's yelling. We've got 4 scientists in front of us, and they could hear this word porno, which has a habit of making people turn their head. And they're all turning around going, don't freaking yell porno. Like, I'm trying to be a serious explorer here. Yeah. And he's like, do you want porno? And I go, why would I want porno?
Because you got a sled shaped like a pair of chickens.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. But he's like, he looked at me confused, and he said, oh, how do you deal with stress? And I'm like, stress? Nobody's jerking off because of stress. And he's like, no, we're French. That's how we deal with stress. And anyway, I said, I don't think Aussies deal with it that way. And then, anyway, as I'm approaching this tent on the polar plateau, I'm thinking, shit, I hope he's not stressed. And then I ended up doing an L-shaped turn and never saw him. And I never saw a human being for 53 days. So the thought of unzipping a tent and finding a stressed Frenchman was too much.
That could be the greatest story I've heard on the pod. Oh, that's fucking incredible. Obviously not a near... Well, that is a near miss.
Yeah.
That's a near miss. That's definitely a near miss.
Bounced off the side of your face.
But obviously, like crevasses, they must be... That's a scary thing. They're constantly near misses, I guess.
Yeah, terrifying. And I lost one of my mentors year before last, Dixie Danzakura, probably the only guy who's kited more mileage than me, connected to a kite on sand, ocean or ice.
So for the listeners who probably don't get what you're saying when you're kiting, you're talking about having a big parachute kite pulling you along on a sled and or a buggy if you're in the Sahara Desert. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you're on skis with a hook that the kite's hooked into, and then the sleds are connected to your back. But Dixie was guiding some clients in Greenland, and I know the position because Simon and I came down off this slope. We had big kites up. We were moving pretty fast, like 20K. That's probably what saved us. But the light was really poor, and then I just felt a bump. I dropped down about a foot and realised that I was on the cap of a massive crevasse. Like I'm talking probably 200 metres wide at the mouth. And once you're on it, if you stop, you're going to increase the downward force and more likely it's going to collapse. The ice in that region was about 3 kilometres thick. So if it's 200 metres wide, you could fall for a K before you hit the deck. And anyway, and then I'm yelling to Simon, crevasse, but he's already on it behind me before he can.
Yeah.
So now we've got the weight of 2 humans and 2 sleds. So combined weight of over probably 300, 400 kilos. And I'm just winding the kite, trying to get it to go fast and then hit the other side, get on good ice again. And literally the next minute, boom, I'm on another one. And I go, okay, we survived the first. Let's just push hard. Got to the other side, dropped the kites and went, holy crap, we never saw them coming. That's where Dixie died. So he had pitched a tent and had the clients in there. They'd run out of water and he wasn't roped up. He said, hey, I'll just go get some more ice, and took 2 steps outside the tent, went through a cap. Because obviously with boots on, your pressure is much higher per square inch.
Yep.
And they lowered a rope 80 metres, couldn't even see the bottom. So he's still there. So for me, you see someone who's more experienced than you, he's been in the game a longer time, probably got a better skill set, and he's gone. So, you're not tricking yourself that you're here through anything but divine intervention at that point.
That's very scary. And so crevasses, are there just cracks in the ice sheet that...
Yeah, when ice goes from a high point to a low point, when it goes through a convex bend, it'll compress inwards and the cracks close. But then if there's a rock feature, or generally it's when it's meeting the coast, it'll bend concave and then everything opens up. And then snow will get pushed in, and you don't know whether that bridge is 2 inches or 2 kilometres thick because you just can't tell. But you can tell you've gone from blue ice to a snow cap. And on the last journey, I had 42 crevasses that I crossed in 2 hours. And one time I did a baseball slide right at the edge, and the sleds went past me and onto the cap. And they would have pulled me in backwards if the snow cap had given the bridge.
Wow.
So I disconnected the kite, took my skis off, and then put a foot onto the cap, thinking if the sleds are there, then it's got to be thick. And my boot went straight through into blue ice. It was probably 6 inches thick, sort of crumbly snow. And at that point, I just pulled hand over hand and got the sleds off the cap. But you realise that, it's only one mistake in those instances and you're not coming home because, the difference with the next journey, we've got a lot of crevasses to cross, but we're roped together, you're on skis, we've got a lot more knowledge now, and it's going to be much more controlled.
And because you mentioned a story to me a few years ago of when you were training for what happens in the event you go down one, and you ended up in a scenario where your instructor went down.
Yeah, I mean, this girl is an amazing girl. So no woman that I know has summited Everest more. Lydia Brady, first female at the age of 19 to summit Everest without oxygen. And her story, she's written a book called The Coming Down is Easy, or The Going Up is Easy. Yeah, The Going Up is Easy because she got to the top of Everest and was the only woman to ever do it without oxygen. But there was no one there. Everyone turned back and she was pig-headed and said, no, I'm going. So there was no one there to verify her ascension. So she took a photo, but it was back in the film days, and it was 89. The film broke on the way down, and her Kiwi team turned on her when she got home. So she went through a really struggle. Anyway, finally somebody in one of the years where there was a lot of melting on the top of Everest pulled a neckerchief out with her name tag on it. And she'd forgotten, obviously in a low oxygen state, that she'd lost it up there.
Yeah.
But it proved that she'd summited. And she's now one of the most recognised climbers on Earth. But I uplinked to her and said, hey, Lydia, you probably don't know me, but I've got this crazy plan to climb the Somo-Becken Glacier, one of the worst glaciers on the Antarctic coast, get to the plateau, cross the plateau, go through the South Pole, come down the other side. I need you to upskill me in crevasse travel. And she's like, yeah, sure, come over to New Zealand.
Perfect.
We'll take a chopper and we'll rope together. She's crossed the Khumbu icefall at the base of Everest 16 times at this point. She's probably crossed it double that now.
Wow.
Teaches me everything. We land and the chopper literally puts one skid on the snow and takes off. My first boot sets off a small avalanche to our right, and Lydia looks at me and goes, shit, the snow quality is terrible. You rope to me, and she swears like a sailor. She goes, don't you fucking move. You rope to me, you do what I say, you step where I step.
This is life or death.
Life or death. And every step we're finding little slabs going left and right down this cornice. Finally get to a hut on the top of the glacier, and we spent the next day bound by storm, and she just taught me everything in theory. So I had the knowledge in theory to save someone if they fell into a crevasse, but it had never been tested. It was book knowledge learned in the hut the day before. The next day, it's a bluebird day. We go outside the ice. The snow has frozen overnight, so it's nice and stable. And we start walking along this cornice. So if you imagine the hut is on a rock promontory, a bit like the Lion King rock, and then we're walking along that edge, looking for a cornice that's bending off. And there's a cornice about the size of a football field. We're walking along the top. I'm roped to her with about 30 metres of rope with knots every 6 metres. And there's a big crack behind me. And in the valley behind us, this whole slab's come away. And I'm like looking at it going, holy shit, that thing, will it get to us? No, we're safe. We're high enough. The avalanche isn't going to get to us. Next minute, I'm on my side getting pulled down along the cornice. And I thought Lydia was pulling me in, trying to teach me to stay focused because I turned to look at this avalanche. And I look, and she's gone. She's disappeared. She's fallen into a crevasse and is falling to her death, pulling me with her. And I roll onto my guts, jamming an ice axe. It's just not holding. And then I roll onto my back, kick my feet in, and finally break a fall. And I'm probably 15 metres from the crevasse mouth when I break it. And then I have to just go through my mind, what do I do to save this woman now? She's hanging in the pit. And she's got her skis on, her pack on, and she's terrified because she thinks I'm going to panic and cut the rope.
Yeah.
And I managed to dig a T-slot on either side, put skis in, and then do what we call prussics, which connect to the main rope. And in the textbooks, it's like, okay, you get your partner secure, and then you detach and put a prussic onto the main rope and slide up on your belly to the hole to just check if they've got a broken limb or if they can self-assist. I'm halfway there, and she goes, I'm feeling a lot of fucking movement up there. You better not be detached from that anchor. And I'm like, oh, no, not at all. So I'm backing up, and then I reattach to the anchor because she just didn't trust that a novice would have enough know-how to build an anchor to save a life.
Yeah.
Anyway, for the next hour and a half, I sat there with her swearing and cursing because she's got to come up, but the rope's cut through sideways. So she comes up to the point where the rope is free, and she's prussicking up, which is where you put a knot, slide it up, pull your boot in it, stand in that, slide the next one up, bring your belly up.
So it's a very long process.
Long process. You're making inches every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the point where it's cut through, you've got to then burrow like a gopher, and you've got snowpack falling in above your head. Finally, she gets out, and for the last 20 minutes, I'm watching a crack develop along the whole length of the cornice. So we've got a football field of snow hanging on our left, and this crack is going from her position directly under my ass and then out behind. And I'm realising that her movement is dislodging the whole slab. If she doesn't get out, soon we're all going to go.
You're both gone.
Yeah, we're both gone. It would have been about a 400-metre fall. So you're not surviving that. Anyway, she gets out and she's exhausted and lays down frontwards, and I'm going, Lydia. And I said, what the fuck? And then I look under her armpit. I go, just look under your armpit and tell me that's not important. She looks under and then follows the crack line to me and goes, shit, move uphill. So we both shimmy uphill to get away from the crack.
Yeah.
But, I mean, she was rattled. I remember she basically said, listen, you do not need any more training. From what I just saw, you're going to be fine. Let's get an airlift out. So we got airlifted out and we're back in Wanaka at a Japanese bar, 2 Asahis. And this is one of the toughest women I've ever campaigned with. And she looks at me with tears in her eyes and says, you know, when I first met you, you struck me as someone who wanted to die. Like you're going into an arena where you're going to get yourself killed. And then having seen you operate under pressure today, you're going to be fine. I have no fear for you at all. And I've just gone, well, that was a bit of a shit show, but it's a good report at the end of the story.
Fucking oath. Man,
it's funny when you get those.
That's gripping.
Yeah.
That's
when you get in that. I love what you say. You know that uplinking, and it's something that I use to apply to the camel trek. You know, I had no experience with animals or anything like this, so you kind of taught us that it was okay to just make that random call out of the blue to the best person that you possibly could. And my first call was to a guy over Russell Osborne over in Lakes Entrance, Victoria, and so I just looked through. This guy had done a 6,500 kilometre camel trek around Australia. Pick up the phone. He was like, "Yeah, no dramas. Come over. I'll show you what I know." And then I had that moment throughout my training where eventually he goes, "Look, you're ready. There's nothing more I can kind of teach you. The only thing stopping you going now is you." And to get that vote of confidence from the people that you've gone to is so like valuable. That final little okay, because you're never going to say it to yourself, or you might call it too early. And getting that third party reinforcement from these guys is great.
Yeah, but also getting young people to realise, hey, with Google now, if you've got a dream in mind, find the best person in the world.
Yeah.
And don't limit it. And then if they don't want to help you, go to the second best person in the world. And then the third, until finally someone you meet is like, I know when people want to uplink to me, it makes my day. I want to pass that information. I don't want to take it to my grave. Like everything I've learned, if I can pass that on and someone can do better than me, that is phenomenal. And that's what Borjusland did. It's what Lydia Brady did. You know, everybody that I've uplinked to, it's almost like you're giving them a USB and saying, listen, put all your data on this, and then boom, it's going in my head.
Well, they have a blueprint to success in whatever they're trying to achieve. They've done. You're trying to do the same thing. So if they've got the information, they've got the data, as you've said, like, fucking why wouldn't you use it? Yeah. I think, it might have been you guys were talking to prior to this. This is a podcast. You know, we're trying to build a podcast. The biggest podcast in the world, just look at what they're doing. They've got the blueprint to success, copy what they're doing. And if you can do it anywhere near as good, you're going to have success. So I love that sort of uplinking idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that something you're focused on more now, like leaving that legacy as opposed to living it as much? Like how old are you now, 53?
Yeah, 53. I mean, I kind of feel like, part of the whole explorer mindset is you've still got that boy within alive and well, so that stops you feeling like an old bloke anyway. I feel like the legacy thing is a bit of an old man's thing to say, I'm parking my boots up. I don't feel that way. I feel like I'm learning every day. Like we've been sailing this steel-hulled 22-year-old boat offshore. Every storm that comes through, little old Nanook's heading out and all the other boats are coming in. The Seaway Tower, there we go, VMR, Southport, this is Nanook. And they're like, there's bad weather coming in. We go, yeah, exactly. And we're going back out there and I'm vomiting my guts up, going, what the hell am I doing out here? This is not my environment. But over the last 6 months, I've built this tenacity to seasickness that I didn't have before. I understand how the boat behaves in storms. I'm still subjugating myself to hardship. So I think once you start going to that, I'm going to leave a legacy, that's the beginning of you putting your boots up. So I'm definitely not there, but I do understand what you're saying, John. There is a point where you start to focus more on that. But I still feel it's active. Like I'm still active adventuring, and that's what's so exciting about what we're talking about. It's not like Ian Thorpe talking to you and saying, hey, you can do this. And you look at his feet, they're size fucking 15.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my feet are 9s. How am I going to create as much propulsion as this superhuman? I'm talking to you as an 85 kilo, middle-aged Australian male without a lot of talent. I tell you, I skied backwards into a tree last week as evidence of that. But I have more persistence, tenacity and grit than the average person.
Because you were 50 when you did the longest solo unsupported.
Yeah, started at 49, finished at 50. Oh, yeah. No, it's 49. So, you know, your body definitely doesn't recover. I could feel it at night. But your mind is, you know, tungsten steel in your late 40s. And there's this very dangerous tipping point where your mind is stronger than your body and things start to go ping because you can push it. So you need to temper that. But I still feel like, you know, the adventures will change a little bit in nature. I probably won't be doing 60-day man-hauling journeys, but with the Kai Power, as long as I'm flying sensibly, my body can deal with the loads and the strain. But I don't see I'll be hanging my boots up anytime soon.
And that's almost just for you and your own continual testing of yourself so you are stronger? Is that sort of what it is?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, without movement, everything decays. You know, your muscles require movement for volume, and then their attachments to the bone require, you know, movement for strength, and then the bone density decreases, we know, if you're not active. So, you know, what we're talking about is getting humans active right through. Met this guy at the bar last night, Dave, he's 70-something, and he's just been pulled off the bench. He's a mining contractor, you know, working more in the back end of mines, and they pulled him back because he's got 50 years experience, and he just said, I'm so happy coming out of retirement because he felt like he was dying slowly. And you know, I understand we do slow down with age, but I think the Japanese concept of ikigai doesn't have a retirement stamp on it. You know, your purpose is till the grave. You know, no matter what that purpose is any given day. For the Australian mindset, our pioneer spirit and our drive and our grit, you know, our soldiers are known to be the best on planet Earth. Entrepreneurs like John are some of the most tenacious on planet Earth. And to keep that alive, we have to get this concept into our young people that purpose is important, persistence is important, and passion we haven't even touched on yet. You know, that's another key vital ingredient that gives you rocket fuel in any endeavour.
And there's so many doors that just can't be unlocked without those elements. Like, you know, you can read the book, you can watch the movie, but you're never going to have that book or movie about you, or you're never going to experience what the people in that story experience. Like, there's so much that you need the passion, you need the purpose, you need that. So I always think that the kind of person who says, oh, one day I want to sit on that beach and I want to drink cocktails and, you know, that's it for the rest of my life. It's generally the kind of person that's never going to be in a position to be able to do that, because we don't want to switch off. We don't want to stop.
Well, my parents are a perfect example of that. They reached that point where they were able to, they lived in Thailand. They were having the relaxing cocktails on the beach in a tropical fucking paradise every day of their life. And even they were getting bored of it. Yeah. Because they needed something. You need something else. You need purpose, passion, drive. And passion is something I'm very passionate about. Finding that passion, and it's constantly evolving, because it doesn't necessarily mean what you started out passionate about isn't what you're going to end up being. So I'm interested in your ideas on passion, because that is one of the 3 Ps. What was it? Persistence, purpose and passion.
Yeah, and we can confuse purpose and passion because they do go hand in glove. But I've met people with great purpose who've lost their passion. So, you know, it's a horrible place to be, because you feel this shame loop going on as, I need to be saving the world, or I need to be reducing plastic in the ocean, or whatever their purpose is, but I don't have a love for it anymore. And then that generally means that you probably strayed from your purpose and you need to relook at it, or you need to look at the way you're doing it and change it. So for me, with a lot of our young vets, if they've come out of a clinic or a hospital alongside a vet that has lost their love for the game, it's like a virus. It infects these young vets, and then we get them in and they're negative. They're talking death over their day-to-day work. This is shit. That, you know, they see the negatives, and then I'll come in and reset them and go, okay, let's just really break this down. I don't want to make your purpose complicated. Your purpose in life is to reduce pain. Just make that really simple. Any animal that comes in, whether it's got a broken tooth, broken leg, skin infection, bloody blocked anal gland, whatever it is, Your purpose for putting your boots on in the morning is to reduce pain. Now, your passion comes from doing that in the best way possible, having the best toys, the best clinic, the best training, the best attitude. You want that client to come in and have what I call a voila moment every time they come in. And the voila moment came from last year being up in northern Norway. We ordered a bottle of wine from a young bloke who just looked like he would rather be somewhere else. And he plonked this bottle of wine on the table, poured out a pretty mediocre rosé. Sarah drank it and was like, yeah, that was pretty crap. And the whole experience was pretty low-key. But that's Norwegian hospitality. They don't really get excited about it. They're good at other things. 6 weeks later in the south of France, same question, can we have a rosé, please? A guy about the same age, 19, 20 years of age, just got so excited. He's looking at Sarah, looking at me, going, there's 5 wineries within 2K here. I'm going to get you the one that I think is the best. So this is the one that I would drink. It's, he noted why he liked it, went out the back, came back with this chill bottle, poured a little bit into a glass, and then was waiting with the bottle, hovering while Sarah tasted it. She looked at him, gives him that's beautiful. And he slams it on the table, yells out, voila, at the top of his voice, and does like a spin. And it was like a theatrical performance. Yeah. And, he didn't spend a lot more calories than the Norwegian guy.
Yeah.
Had the same result physically, but we never forgot him. And I realised, okay, this is what we need to teach these guys in our veterinary game. You want every single interaction to be a voila moment. You want those people to know that you know what your purpose is and your passion is to sort their problem out, whatever it is. And it doesn't matter whether you're selling insurance, widgets, whatever you're doing, creating a podcast. If it's done with passion, and you can't fake passion, it cannot be. The human spirit knows immediately when you've got a salesman working you and faking passion. You can't fake it, but if it's there, it's the most powerful thing on earth.
And that's Jim Carrey said something that goes along those lines of the impact that we can have on others is the most valuable currency we have. And I totally agree, because the environment that we create around us has an impact on my child, my friends, my parents, everyone around us, even that person in the shopping aisle that maybe I'm had a bad day and they get in front of me or something like that. If I have a bad interaction with them, it's not only going to affect them, it's going to affect me. So like the positive impact we can have on the people surrounding us it is the most valuable currency we have. I agree.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to remember is we generally I love this proverb where it's talking about the world of a miser becomes smaller, the world of a generous person gets larger. And whether that's generous in finance or giving or philanthropy, which I know John's big on, or it's generous in giving time. And I learnt when getting involved with the tsunami, probably one of my big life changes was 2004, 2005, that tsunami that hit the Aceh coast up in northern Indonesia. Yeah. My folks lived in Indonesia for a long period of time, so I spoke fluent Indonesian. And within 3 days of the tsunami hitting, I'm on ground zero helping. And I did interview after interview after interview, over 1,000 interviews for Medicines du Monde, who were patching people up and helping survivors. And I learnt from that people actually, when they lose everything, when the world's gone to shit, they do not care about stuff. There wasn't one person, and these are poor people anyway, they weren't cared about their motorbike or their thatch hut, their fishing boat. All that they were concerned about was relationship, family and friends. And I came away from that going, I'm going to try and make sure that I don't rush into changes, no matter how busy I am, that if somebody asks me something, or if they want to uplink, or they just want time or encouragement, that I will try and remember those interviews way back in Aceh and go, I'm going to give you time, because my world gets bigger when I share things I've learned, and my world gets bigger when I'm generous. So I'm going to give you time.
Well, it doesn't sound like too many people on the ground cared much about anything if they're letting a vet fix them up. It's like this concept of a great charity that I heard. Yeah. It's like doctors without diplomas. It's similar to the border ones, but it's just people who are just willing to give it a crack.
Yeah,
they just wondered why I kept trying to examine them up the back. That's normally where we start.
That's talent.
Yeah. So I'm interested in a couple more of your treks, because and I don't know how much time you got. You guys.
What do we got?
pretty
What do you
good.
got?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought
Half
yeah,
a?
cool.
Yeah.
Easy. Specifically, the one. So I was well informed that you were a polar adventurer, but I didn't realise these desert adventures that you'd been part of. Specifically, that Sahara one, which sounds incredible. Dodging landmines and whatnot. But you've also done the Simpson Desert.
Yeah, well, the Simpson was like it was my bloody.
That's where you stood me up.
yeah. Well, Johnny was in the Simpson on the other side on Lake Eyre.
Yeah.
And the second attempt kind of morphed into an attempt because it was meant to be to go have a beer with Johnny in the desert, but then COVID intervened and they wouldn't let me across, or then they said, if you go across, you're not coming back.
Yeah.
And I had my dog Lily, who was getting older, and, I'm like, shit, I need to go and do this. So I had everything that I needed to, the buggy, the kites, with a support team. So I rang Johnny and said, hey, they're not going to let me cross the border. We're going to try and do another crossing attempt. And it failed largely because of the border crossing. We got to the Northern Territory border and couldn't cross it. So second time in 11 years we scarpered, but I learned so much that then September last year, a couple of mates put together another vehicle, and this was a solo supported, so you just physically couldn't carry the weight of the water on the buggy and have it move with wind power.
Mm-hmm.
So the boys would go ahead and make camp, and then I'd spend the whole day dragging this bloody thing or flying kites to get up and over these 650 dunes.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful desert. Like, it is magical. John's walked through there. It's just this tangy orange, like you can't describe. The sunsets, you get this purple haze. The stars are unbelievable. It is one of Australia's great wildernesses, but it is brutal to cross. Like, you don't get wind. When they've had fires through, the trees will become very hard, but then snap at the base. So they basically act like scimitars. As you're kiting at speed through, will just pierce straight through your body. So you're wearing body armour to stop these ironbark bloody skewers pinning you to the sled. And I've had like a snake thrown from the front wheel straight into my lap, and I'm just like, whoa. I haven't so far. It's probably a taipan out there, I would say. But he was as scared of me as I was of him.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to bite me on the dick and then kill me.
Have you seen that footage of the guy who?
Yes.
I got myself in a bit of a spot here
when he got pulled up by the cops.
No. This guy's just out. I think he was changing. He was
up his pants,
and it was up his jeans.
What?
Right? And so he's got a set of his cable tie or something like this, and he's tied off so it can't get up because he's like, I thought it was going to crawl up and bite me on the jewel.
Yeah.
So he's got this snake right up in there, and I think it was a
black snake or
brown snake.
Solid snake.
Nasty thing.
Fuck.
And so he's like, I'm just going to rip her out. So he's doing all this with one hand because he's filming.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3 and rip it out. And 1, 2, 3, rips it out, throws it. He's like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Fuck.
Pulls this decent-sized snake straight out of his pants.
Oh, my God.
And I'm like, this, with a nice Australian accent as well. No wonder we got such a good reputation overseas.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's that desert has got a lot of challenges, but September last year, 650K, and, amazingly managed to cross. But, I mean, with wildlife, that's something that's always created issues. And over a number of journeys, bears have become a bit of a problem for us. And when Simon and I were crossing Greenland, we would sleep very lightly in a thin tent with a gun between us, a big 308. And I was praying that the headline would not be vet shoots polar bear, the last dodo bird in the wilderness. But it was either that or you had to be ready to do that because they do come through tents and they will hunt humans. The reason I couldn't do that journey solo is the Greenland authorities will not let you travel solo because a single human being will attract a bear to track him immediately, or her.
Yeah.
2 men, he'll think twice about it. But we did have a moment there where we saw a bear paw print, and that's as close as we got, thankfully, in Greenland. But, I mean, this thing was the size of a dinner plate. So the size of...
The tension in yourself trying to avoid bears, trying to, like, a tent. It's not going to stop anything, is it?
Oh, it's stressful.
You've had a bit of a closer interaction than a footprint with a bear, though.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I think going into this, the tail end of the Project Zero, we're right up in bear country. Svalbard, where we're heading, has more polar bears per square metre than anywhere on Earth. So we've got to learn to be comfortable with them. But I do have a bit of phobia.
I'm not sure if I'm camping in a place where they measure per square metre the bear population.
Yeah, it's crawling with them. But I mean, the first bear that we really had a scare with was in Alaska. We had a journey there where Katali, my son, and I were partnered together to try and do a transit to the Brooks Range, which, if you imagine Alaska's a bit like New Zealand. It's got this spine of mountains down the middle.
Yeah.
The summit of that is a lake called Summit Lake. We got landed by an aircraft on there, and then you're losing altitude over 350 kilometres, coming down waterfalls and rapids, and we were to climb a mountain called Mount Dunarak. We ended up canning the climb because I lost communication, rolled over in a rapid and flooded the sat phone, and then on day 10 we were attacked by a big Kodiak grizzly, who I think in all of my encounters with wildlife was the most terrifying.
Yeah.
And I've had sharks hit me from behind. I've had lion nearly hit a daughter of mine. Following her back from the toilets in Botswana, and this is a lion that we found out had killed someone the previous year. Fuck. So we've had some pretty serious encounters with predators, and this thing was a factor of 10 times more scary than anything. And we came around the corner, both of us in a kayak, an inflatable kayak. I drifted around and saw this bear feeding about 200 metres off the bank, and he's eating berries, and he looked like a big, cuddly kind of rabbit, huge, but probably, the size of a Honda Civic, really. And then I whispered to Kit, "Hey, grizzly." And then so we're holding our position in the current. We're probably 20 metres off the bank, and then he stands up to full height, and no kidding, I reckon he was 8.5, 9 foot tall. So broad through the chest, I'm like, holy crap! These thoughts that you could fight off a bear or have any chance were just gone.
Yeah.
Like, I did not ever want to go hand to hand with this guy. And then he went from being mildly interested to just psychotic. And I've watched online. If you go on YouTube and look at bear charges, they will do this kind of shuffle and then present, which is a mock charge to show you how big they are and how scary they are. And at that point, you're meant to raise your hands and make yourself look big and don't increase the distance, because that'll invite a proper charge. Yell and scream, bang pots and pans, fire a flare, whatever you can, and then get your bear spray ready. This guy went from standing up to full charge, committed to kill, like within a millisecond. And I reckon in half a second he'd covered the 200 metres of bank. There was stone coming out the back. He hit the water. Just as he hit the water, my brain's going, the river will protect us. He won't swim. I don't know why I thought bears couldn't swim, but that's a fallacy. This guy could swim faster than Thorpe.
Fuck.
And he'd covered probably the distance from the bank to me in about 3 strokes, and then literally 10 feet from me just hit like a wall. And we've got this lady back home called Heather Clark, who whenever I go somewhere, I go, "Heather, you're on." And she's we call her our prayer warrior. So she woke up in the middle of the night. It was daylight where we were, and just thought, Jeff's going to die. And boom, she's on her knees. This bear hit something like, I would say, a Labrador running into a glass window. And boom, he stops and exhales all his breath in a spray that hit me in the face. That's how close we were.
Yeah.
I could smell fish and berries, and I'm fumbling with a flare gun on my chest, and realised at the time I'm going to die. I'm going to get torn to pieces in front of my son, and then more than likely he's going to get into the fray, and we're both going to get severely injured, drowned, or killed. Anyway, this bear stopped, and I just whispered to Kit, "Lift your paddle." And we just lifted our paddle and let the river take us gently, which is completely the wrong thing to do to increase your distance. But this bear he looked like he'd been hit with a stun gun.
Wow.
And he walked back to the bank and then followed us as we drifted around the corner. And then it sort of came to a shale area where we were in a foot deep water. He could have walked straight out and got us. And then we get pushed around the corner. And both were just in shock. And then that night you have to set the tent up again, and you can hear bears walking on the the river stones.
Fuck that.
Yeah, it's just not.
What is bear spray going to do anything really? Like really? What is bear spray?
amazing.
Is it like pepper spray for bears?
Yeah, it's actually made from capsicum. So what you would eat in your hot sauce, that's what bear spray is. But it is 75% of the time it's effective, but I get the feeling we would have been the 25% had I been able to get it. But it happens so fast that there is just no chance that you could have halted that bear's forward momentum. Even the thought of having a Colt 45 on your chest, you'd have to hit centre of mass 3 or 4 times to stop that.
And it's happening at a speed where you just can't do that.
You just wouldn't do that.
So you've got such an inedible smell, so horrific. Right.
Yeah, he's just gone.
Even a hungry, ravaging bear go, oh, fuck that.
Well, it could be that. The same thing.
That's rough. That's rough.
I might meet a poodle on the beach of the Gold Coast that we've had to do an anal gland squeeze 2 years before, and he walks up, he's all happy, and then he smells you and goes, recoils like the bear. He's like, that's a vet. So he might have just realised I was a vet.
Yeah.
Oh fuck! Our for the YouTube watchers, our camera for me and you, for me and John is off. So I apologise. It's a bit of
you get my ugly face.
Yeah, so you're on for most of it, but I'll figure that out later on. But yeah, mate, that idea that you are like being followed and stalked by bears and polar bears, that just seems like a tent. I don't know what it does. Like Is there any other? What do you do if you're faced with that? The flare? Is it?
Well, it's so hard because we're trying to tell the story. So the vessel that we're on is Nanook. Nanook is the Inuit word for the king of all bears. So in their culture, when they would pray for the hunt, they would pray to Nanook to give them grace and give them a good fish or a good seal hunt. And the reality is, if Nanook is the canary in the coal mine. Like if the polar bear is happy, the whole planet's happy. At the moment, the polar bear's fishing grounds, its eating grounds, hunting grounds are getting diminished because the shoreline decreases as the ice retreats. Nanook is starving, he's unhappy. So the whole of Project Zero is to try and find a way that we can reverse that cycle and get Nanook happy. But in the so doing, we put ourselves into his realm, and that invites us to be prey, but it also brings that horrible opportunity that you could end up in a position where you've got to kill a bear to protect the greater mass. And I'm struggling with that one. I mean, I know it firsthand because another explorer, Carl Alvey, a British guy I know, he was guiding clients from east to west not that long ago across Greenland, and they saw a bear tracking them as they were climbing the glacier, and they're about 30 kilometres in the first night from the coast, and the bear camped about a kilometre away. They could see him through the telescope or binoculars. And he rings national parks and says, hey, I've got a bear that looks like it might be following me. And they said, oh, how far are you from the coast? And he said 30K. He said, no, that's fine. If you walk another 20 to 30K tomorrow, you'll be 60K in. That's too far for him to hunt along the shoreline. He won't follow you. Yeah. So they do 30K. They're setting up, bearing in mind it's 24-hour daylight this time of year. Yeah. Setting up camp. He puts his clients to bed in their tent, and then he's out scanning the horizon. Sure enough, 500 metres away, this bear is there. And he's like, oh, crap. He's now followed us for 60K. Rings national parks, and they go, okay, if he's 60K from the ocean, he will kill. He cannot get back without killing. So one of you will die, or the bear will die. Fuck. He says, no, surely you can do something. I do not want to shoot a bear. I've got clients here. The whole thing is to teach them the love of these polar wastes. I don't want to shoot a bear in front of my clients. Yeah. Like, what the hell are you thinking? So they said, listen, we'll send a chopper out tomorrow and we'll shoo him back to the coast. So in the morning they get up. The bear's now 200 metres from camp. So he's getting more and more cocky. Chopper comes in and it shoos him back to the coast. So he's shuffling, and they shoo him about 5 kilometres, and they're staying in the air, and they watch him start to follow his own tracks home. So they radio through to Carl and say, hey, you're fine, get moving now. He's heading back to the coast. So they do another 25K that day. They're now nearly 90K inland, and he sets up camp with a real heavy heart, grabs the gun, grabs the binoculars, and sure enough, the bear's back. So he calls National Park, and they're like, well, you can take the risk, but he's coming into your tent tonight. Or you go up there and you put one in him. There's something wrong with him. He's either got a broken tooth or he's aged and he can't hunt. So we would be shooting him anyway. And he just said he struggled so hard with it, and he had to walk up to that bear and end its life. So for me, I don't ever want to get in that position because obviously I've got the veterinary.
Yes.
Do no harm, ease pain, tell the story, improve their outcome. That doesn't look real good if Geoff the vet plugs one of the dodo birds that are left.
But that's the reality of being out there. It's on the camel trek we fell in love with camels, obviously, along that path. I never really had any history with them, or I didn't come into that camel trek for a love of camels. That was grown during the trek. And I keep having to prepare myself mentally. I'm probably going to get a bull camel attack at some stage on this trek. And at the peak of love for the animals, I have to then go through and have my first bull camel attack. And it wasn't how I expected. I was expecting this emotionally devoid moment because adrenaline would kick in and I'd just do the right thing and I'd protect my crew. But the way it ended up happening was obviously a moment that was set to teach me. So we had a camel that came in to camp quite early in the morning, and we were camped out near this water hole. So he'd obviously come in, had a bit of a feed and then a bit of a drink, and then come out and decided to just hang out with us for the day. And this was a beautiful bull. It'd been a good season out there, he was muscly, he was great shape, and he was letting me get up to about 1.5 meters from him. So I was slowly getting closer up to him. I was so tempted to throw a rope around him and bring him along. But as we got later and later on in the day, he just started, getting a bit feisty with my boys. Then he started attacking, and I was shooing him away. I did some warning shots, and it got to that point of, as the sun was starting to drop, I knew that if I didn't take care of him, I'd wake up probably without one of my boys because I had the bulls around. I had to have all my boys tied up to a tree, tethered to a tree. So they're like tied up defenseless against this wild bull. So I had to make the call. And so my first camel I killed was, had to shoot, was one that I had spent the whole entire day getting to know. And
it's brutal.
I was like, that's not the experience that I...
and I think it's easy, for people listening or someone... with a real animal bent to judge that action and go, well, if you weren't there, you wouldn't have to shoot them. But the reality is we can't protect the places we don't love. And if people don't see it and understand it, they don't fall in love with it. So to fall in love with Australia's deserts or fall in love with the polar regions, we need human beings that can get down there and get the images and the stories so that we fall in love with them and protect them. Yeah. The problem is that comes with the risk of interactions that end like this.
Yeah. That sort of stuff is beyond me mentally. How you deal with that sort of stuff in a tent, trying to sleep.
You don't sleep well, and I think you take it away. Whether it's a sailing journey where you're lying as a skipper, listening for the anchor to move or change, or whether you're waiting for a bear to come through the side of the tent. And I've had a mate, Eric, have a bear come through. Sarah, his sister, and him were asleep doing a northwest crossing through the Northwest Passage above Canada, and they had a bear come through and slam her on the chest and completely wind her and immobilise her. And then, he had to go out. He couldn't find the gun. He's got thick bottle glasses. All he could find was a alloy shovel, and he cracked this bear across the head while it was trying to kill his sister. And it just stood up. And it was a 9 foot tall bear, and he's washed his right shoulder, moved back into a swing, and realised he was going to die. Sarah had recovered from her winding, found the gun, and came in behind the bear and fired a solid in the air. Like a solid's a 12 gauge round, but it's like the size of a ball bearing. Yeah, and it's designed for maximum stopping power at speed. But you've got to wait till they're on you, and Eric's yelling at Sarah going, what the you missed. And she's leaning over him around the bear going, I don't want to kill him. I just want to scare him. And Eric's like, kill him now or he's going to kill me.
Yeah.
And then the bear's watching this argument like a game of tennis. And he eventually just shuffles off. And he goes through a tripwire that they'd set up with 4 flares on either corner of the tent that he'd stepped over delicately. So he smelt it, stepped his 9-foot tall frame gently over this thing, attacked Sarah, and then on the way out, set off 2 of the flares. One of them fell and burned a big hole in the side of the tent. The whole day they spent repairing the tent with the bear about 300 metres away just watching. So the benefit of kites is that you can outpace the bear and get away. So they did 150 kilometres that day, but still slept uneasy.
Yeah. What happens if the wind stops? You just have to carry your sled? What's the go there?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a hard thing because your natural tendency is to keep moving and make some mileage. But on the last couple of crossings, I realised it was better just to sleep and reserve calories. So you almost go into a hibernation state and wait for the wind to come back. So, and then when the wind's back, you push for 22 hours. Don't waste it.
Yeah. And before we finish, I want to touch on a story that you told last night, which is fucking incredible / disgusting with your and you touched on it in the last pod, the belly freezing.
Yeah, and this winding back, if we talk about things that go wrong in the wilderness, generally are not just one thing. It's generally what we call a domino effect. So winding back to how I got frostbite on the belly was I'd been in that first killer storm with Faisal the Frenchman, and then I managed to get past him. About 3 days later, we got hit by another storm, and I was so frustrated with so many days not making distance that when the storm came to an end, I wasn't patient enough. I should have waited another 6 to 12 hours. The wind was starting to moderate, but we were still getting some 40, 50 knot gusts come through, and the base wind had gone down to about 25 knots. So I went out and I put a 9-metre kite up, buried it in the snow, ran 25-metre lines back to the sled, clipped it to the side of the sled, and then walked to the kite, checked the lines. And as I'm walking back to go and put my skis on and connect and take off, I see on the horizon, it looks like 1,000 horses galloping towards me, and I realise there's another front coming through. And it was a 60-knot gust, and I start sprinting to try and disconnect the kite from the sled because I realise if it hits the kite, it's going to self-launch and I'm going to lose everything. And it's similar to Sophie Madison talking about losing her camels last night. I had that chill because I know what that feeling's like. The sled's got my sat phone, it's got my EPIRB, it's got my stove, my ability to keep warm. I'm going to die from exposure and no one's going to know where I am because the tracker that they're tracking me on is taken off with a kite laterally towards the Antarctic Ocean. So the gust passes me. I'm probably 5 meters from the sled at this point, hits the kite, and the kite launches. Next minute, the sled is coming at me at about 3 meters away at speed, but it's chest height. And I have that split-second option of ducking and feeling no pain, but then potentially dying of exposure, or getting on and trying to control this thing with 4 Kevlar lines that could cut your hand off, whizzing through the air at speed. So I jump and I get on top of the sled, and next minute I'm on the snow with the sled spinning madly, with the boobs, the nipples kind of dragging through the snow. Yeah. And the only piece of metal on the sled capable of cutting lines is where the runner's attached to the bottom of the Kevlar. There's a tiny 2 mil gap. And as the kite spins, I can feel it cutting through my thigh, and then it hits this metal piece, and all 4 lines are just severed. Boom! But in that moment, I've gone about 200 to 300 meters laterally, just in these crazy circles, and the centripetal force is threatening to rip me off the sled. I've got a knife on my thigh, but I can't reach it because if I let go, I'm going to lose the sled. So I'm fast thinking, how the hell am I going to get this thing under control without a knife? Anyway, it sorted itself out. But, after getting over the terror of that, I put the tent up and waited another day. The next day I got out, and the perfect kite for that day's condition would have been the 9 meter. So I then had to choose either a 6 metre, and the sleds were too heavy, I couldn't move, or go to an 11 metre. The problem with the 11 metre is I had to fly it really high, and it kept catching on my jacket and pulling the jacket up and exposing the midsection. So on the first day, I got a little bit of frost damage, and okay, I got to be more careful. The second day, I just got really focused on making miles. Making really good miles, was probably out there for 8 or 9 hours. At the end of the day, I dropped the kite and felt something metallic hit my belly. And I looked, and the hook on the kite harness had hit a completely frozen midsection. It looked like somebody had strapped a stake across that section below your pubis and the belly button. And I just, with panic, realised I'd completely frozen the entire muscle, skin and fat of my midsection. And I rang the American base, got some medical advice on how to reperfuse it, and they told me how to re-warm it slowly, don't do it quickly. And it meant that I minimised the area of cell death to probably, say, 2 playing cards lying laterally across your belly. But then over the next 4 weeks, that just rotted, and every day I'd have to cut bits of flesh off, and it would ooze into the bandages, and I was running out of bandage material and tearing up clothing to pack underneath the harness. But the thing was, I was at that point doing this thing rolling the clock, where I was pushing for 16, 18, 22 hours a day with this harness on and losing fluid the whole time through this belly.
Yeah.
The Americans were asking for daily photos, and at one point they said, listen, you're done. You cannot continue with this injury in the state it is. And I just said, hey, you send a plane out, I'm not getting on it. I'm crossing this continent. And, you know, that's the kind of pig-headedness that we get when we're attached to purpose. So the injury was minor because I could imagine women with their breasts ripped off and going through chemo that I'd met at home. And to me, cutting bits of my own flesh off and driving forward, putting a harness over the top, just felt like, you know, hey, well, this is part of me connecting to the very purpose that I'm working for. And it was another kind of awakening to go, wow, okay, if we get purpose aligned with hardship, we have rocket fuel, absolute rocket fuel. And this is what we're passing on to our young folk.
And also advice on how to get rid of that spare tyre. It's quite an extreme way.
It's not good though, because I can never get a 6-pack now. I can get a 6-pack up the top, but then you have this like muffin top of damaged kind of looks bloody awful.
I dropped down to 78 odd kilos on the camel trek. I can show you a photo. It's like, it's called skinny fat.
I know it. I know it well.
It's terrible. Like, I was like, there's nothing to see under here. Within 2 months of coming back, I'd put on 15 kilos because it was a shit show underneath.
Yeah, man, that's an incredible journey. I feel like there's so much more we could talk about, but I'm obviously conscious of your time. So before we finish, is there anything you want to plug coming up? Obviously, Project Zero. And
absolutely. Project Zero. So either my Instagram, Dr Geoff Wilson with a G, or Project Zero on Instagram is freaking awesome. And then www.projectzero.earth. That'll have the live tracker. It'll have daily blogs. It'll have the live webcam. And honestly, I challenge you, if you're having a shit day at work, get on the webcam. There'll also be this really cool thing that we call the Pivotal mood board. So Pivotal provided the Starlink network and the data that we need to get those webcams working.
Yep.
For me to generate a culture of kindness under extreme hardship, every day we'll have a crew note, and it might be, Krusty, you're an amazing bloke. Of course, it's not going to be, Dalai Lama type thinking. It's adventure thinking, But if you're having a tough day, get on that crew webcam and have a look on the right-hand side. Hopefully there's something that resonates with you in your day and helps you just refocus and think about adventure.
I love that, mate. That's very good. We've persisted through some of our own issues today with the camera, the fucking electrician, the roadworks outside. A very good episode. Really enjoyed it, and thank you very much for joining us, mate.
Hey, thanks so much.
Thank you, John, as well. You did all right.
Good stand in.
Perfect.
Stand in. Well done. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.